By being so big, Rome essentially functioned as a giant free trade bloc. Turning the Mediterranean into a Roman lake allowed for specialization and economies of scale to build and flourish. As the empire progressed, you ended up with a tragedy of the commons, however. The state, being held in common, was exploited by individuals to their own ends. Centurions in the army would use conquest to propel a political career or use the army to march back on Rome. You had wealthy individuals spend their money on works in Rome proper to become popular and launch them into a career in the Senate, then using that position to gain wealth from the population. Most public works, bread and circuses, the welfare state, were either paid with taxes or, if there was not enough silver, was paid by debasing the currency and issuing the debased currency to pay for public works and the wars. Everything was incentivized in Rome except innovations in productivity. One had a better chance at fortune by leading an army or a political coup than by building a better mousetrap. Worse yet, because of slavery, most people were disincentivized from any rapid increase in productivity, because if you owned slaves, which was easier, investing in machinery that anyone could copy and use, or investing in slaves that you then are the sole proprietor of and have a fairly guaranteed return on investment? Obviously, investing in slaves was a better choice for any individual Roman. So while Rome facilitated trade, specialization, and economy of scale that contributed to much of its wealth, it actively disincentivized technological innovation. As inflation and plunder of the state became worse and worse, barbarian kingdoms within the borders of Rome began to percolate up. Some were dealt with militarily, others with bribes, others were conscripted into military service, but you saw alternative governments develop within Rome. These alternative governments had less taxation, but still benefited from the protection of the Roman Empire and the free trade it facilitated. Thus, the barbarian governments were parasites. Recent archaeological evidence suggests that agricultural production within Rome's borders was actually highest toward its end. It's just that the Roman government was losing its grip and wasn't able to tax anymore, but still facilitated the free trade. When Rome fell, free trade fell, and economies of scale and specialization fell. And so you saw European kingdoms being forced to be largely self-sufficient, resulting in a massive decline in standard of living and all the Dark Ages and stuff. The Byzantine Empire lacked primary resources and manufacturing. Its wealth was predicated on trade and functioning something as a middleman. This lasted for 1,000 years because it was able to play the Italian city-states against each other, and had limited angles of attack from the east, and for whatever reason didn't self-destruct from politicos exploiting the state like the Western Roman Empire did. Yet whenever it came time for war, the Byzantine Empire's lack of any real resources, primary or manufactured, resulted in it having a hard time raising an army when it came time for war. It was forced to raise mercenary armies, and so it was conquered by the Ottomans in 1453 simply because it lacked any solid resource or manufacturing base. The Arab empires that came from the splitting, infighting, and reshuffling of the Caliphate suffered from their essentially feudal economic system. The Abbasids, the Umayyads, the Fatimids, and finally the Mamelukes. I'm sorry if I pronounce all these wrongs, I just read these things, I don't take much classes on this anymore. Inherited territories which imported primary goods and exported finished products. Toward their end, that pattern had reversed simply because the subjects of the feudal lords had very little to gain from innovation, and the feudal lords had much more predictable returns on investment through internal conquest by attacking other lords. This was profitable to the lords by conquering because their subjects had to fight, but the lord was the only one who benefited from the extra land. Both serfs and the lord did the fighting, but only the lord profited. This was horrendously inefficient, and so it's no surprise that manufacturing went from the Arab kingdoms to Italy and Spain. Spain was able to accumulate massive amounts of gold through its American conquests. If you lived in Spain, it made more sense to invest in trading in gold or invest in some sort of expedition than to invest in domestic industry. France, Britain, and the Low Countries, however, did not have this luxury, And so Spain spent its gold on manufactured goods imported from those countries. This resulted in Spain not developing a manufacturing base. The Italian city-states had something of a monopoly on rational economics, while Northwest Europe and the Islamic states were largely feudal. And much like the American industries after World War II, Italian industries caved into price controls, production regulation, and apprenticeship regulation from the unions, or the guilds. As Northwest Europe boomed as a result of political developments that facilitated a merchant class and the influx of Spanish gold, Italian industries, which were rattled with guild regulations for a, quote, mature, close quote, economy, couldn't compete, and so fell behind the rest of Europe. In the Qin dynasty in China, it was more profitable to secure government monopolies on certain goods in certain regions than to innovate in agricultural or manufacturing techniques. Getting into the civil service and collecting taxes was more profitable for any individual than was investing in machinery that, may or may not pan out. And so the seeds of collapse for all sorts of ancient states are sown with state violence. What happens is that it becomes more profitable for the individual to try to commandeer the state than for the individual to honestly try to increase his productivity. In all these examples, the state is an avenue for non-productive investment. Slavery in Rome discouraged industrial investment and was maintained by state violence. The welfare state and war socialism that racked the Roman economy was paid with taxes collected at the end of a sword. Arab feudalism made warfare more profitable than increasing productivity, and so lords invested in state violence and internal conquest instead of productivity. American gold made state violence a more lucrative investment for Spain than investment in manufacturing, and so Spain lacked a manufacturing base because it was more profitable in the short run for any Spaniard to invest in violence than production, which resulted in Spain's relative ruin. Whereas France, the Low Countries, and Britain, it was more profitable to invest in production. Italian union regulations resulted in the city-states falling behind Northwest Europe. China's civil service apparatus made investment in state violence more lucrative than investment in productivity for any individual. The pattern's pretty clear. All throughout history, the temptation to invest in state violence has diverted individual resources away from endeavors that actually help man.